Imagine driving down a lonely road at night when suddenly, out of nowhere, a dog blocks your path, refusing to move. But what if she wasn't just lost? What if she was trying to tell you something? This story will leave you speechless. Now, we want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and let's see how far this story travels. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because tomorrow we have another incredible story you won't want to miss. She wasn't just a dog, she was a lifesaver. Rachel Stevens had been driving for hours. The two-lane country road stretched endlessly before her, swallowed by the darkness of the night. The only sounds were the steady hum of her tires against the wet asphalt and the rhythmic tapping of rain against her windshield. She was alone, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but the occasional road sign to remind her she was still headed in the right direction. Then, out of nowhere, a dark shape appeared in her headlights. Rachel's heart lurched as she slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding slightly on the slick pavement. Her breath caught in her throat as she gripped the steering wheel, her eyes locked on the figure just a few feet ahead. It was a dog. The animal stood firmly in the middle of the road, soaked to the bone, ribs visible beneath her matted fur. But it wasn't just the dog's frail condition that sent a shiver down Rachel's spine. It was her stance. Her paws were planted firmly, her chest squared, as if she were deliberately blocking the road. Rachel flicked on her hazard lights, her pulse still racing. The dog didn't move. She didn't flinch at the lights, or even at the sound of Rachel's engine idling. Behind her, barely visible in the downpour, was a small cluster of shivering puppies, huddled together, their tiny bodies trembling from the cold. Rachel's mind raced. Was this some kind of accident? Had she wandered onto the road by chance? She honked the horn. Nothing. The dog didn't startle. She didn't run. She just stood there, her piercing eyes locked onto Rachel's through the rain-streaked windshield. Rachel reached for her phone, thinking she should call for help, but then the dog did something strange. Instead of darting away or cowering, she lowered her head slowly, almost pleadingly. Then she took a single step forward. Rachel's breath hitched. She had never seen a dog behave like this. There was something human in her eyes, something desperate. "What do you want?" Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. With shaking hands, she turned on her flashlight and carefully reached for the car door. But the moment she cracked it open, the dog took a step back. Not running away, inviting her to follow. Rachel hesitated, her heart pounding. Something about this wasn't right, but something deep inside her told her she couldn't just drive away. Rachel sat frozen in the driver's seat, gripping the edge of the door as the dog stared at her through the rain. Every instinct told her this was unusual. Dogs didn't act like this. They ran, they barked, they cowered. But this one, she was waiting. Rachel swallowed hard and glanced past the dog. The puppies were still huddled together, their tiny bodies trembling, too weak to move. They weren't wild. They weren't afraid of people. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second sign was the way the mother dog refused to leave. Rachel took a deep breath, grabbed her flashlight, and finally stepped out of the car. The moment her boots hit the wet pavement, cold air sliced through her, sending a shiver down her spine. The rain, steady and unrelenting, soaked through her jacket almost instantly. But the dog didn't flinch. She took a single step back, keeping her eyes locked on Rachel. Then another, and another. Leading her away from the car. Rachel's pulse pounded. Was she crazy for following? She looked around. The road stretched into endless darkness, the trees on either side forming a thick, impenetrable wall. No cars, no lights, no signs of life, only the sound of the rain. Rachel turned her flashlight toward the dog, watching as she stopped at the very edge of the road, her tail twitching anxiously. She wasn't running away. She was calling Rachel to follow. Rachel's fingers tightened around the flashlight. "What is it?" she whispered, stepping closer. "What are you trying to show me?" The dog didn't move. Rachel turned her gaze toward the puppies again. They weren't following their mother. They just sat there, too exhausted, too cold. That's when it hit her. The mother dog wasn't asking Rachel to help them. She was leading her somewhere else. Rachel's chest tightened. She knew she should be afraid. She knew she should get back in the car, drive into town, call for animal control, do anything but step into that darkness. And yet, something deep inside her whispered, "Go." She took a step forward. The dog immediately turned and darted toward the trees. But she didn't disappear. She stopped and waited. Rachel swallowed hard. Then, with her heart hammering against her ribs, she stepped off the road and followed. Rachel's boots sank into the damp grass as she stepped off the road, the thick scent of rain and earth filling her lungs. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, but it barely reached beyond a few feet ahead. The dog moved carefully, stopping every few steps to glance back, her glowing eyes locked onto Rachel's. She was making sure Rachel was still following. Rachel shivered, not just from the cold. This was insane. She was alone, deep in the countryside, following a strange dog into the woods in the middle of the night. What was she thinking? But something kept her moving. The dog picked up her pace, weaving through trees and stepping over thick roots with ease. Rachel, however, struggled, her boots slipping on the wet ground. She wasn't built for this. Her heart pounded louder with every step. Then, a sound. Rachel froze. It was faint, barely audible over the rain. A low, muffled moan. Her blood ran cold. Her first instinct was to turn back, to run for the safety of her car. But then the dog whined softly and took another step forward. Rachel swallowed. Someone was out there. Someone. Alive. Gripping her flashlight tighter, she forced her feet to move. Her breathing grew shallow as she pushed deeper into the woods. The trees thickened around her, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Every horror movie she'd ever seen screamed at her to stop. But then, another sound. Louder this time, human. Rachel's flashlight beam caught something just ahead. She gasped. A figure slumped against the base of a tree, barely visible through the heavy rain. A man, his clothes soaked, his head tilted downward, his body unmoving. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered. She rushed forward, her heart hammering in her chest. As she drew closer, the dog suddenly growled low, her wet fur bristling. Rachel stopped cold, her breath catching in her throat. Something was wrong. A faint rustling sound came from the bushes just beyond the man. Rachel swung her flashlight toward the noise, her pulse skyrocketing. Then a small whimper. Rachel's eyes widened. The beam of light landed on two small figures, half hidden in the underbrush. Children. Her breath hitched. They were huddled together, their clothes torn, their faces streaked with mud and fear. The older one, a boy, maybe 7 or 8, shielded the smaller girl behind him, his wide eyes darting toward Rachel in terror. Rachel's stomach dropped. What had she just walked into? Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the children, their small bodies trembling in the cold. The boy, no older than 7 or 8, stood protectively in front of his little sister, his arms spread slightly, as if shielding her from an unseen danger. His wide, terrified eyes locked onto Rachel's flashlight beam. The girl, barely 5, clutched something ragged in her tiny hands, her damp curls plastered to her pale face. The dog stepped forward and let out a soft whimper, her tail twitching anxiously. She wasn't leading Rachel to just anyone. She had been guarding these children. Rachel swallowed hard and turned back to the man slumped against the tree. His head bobbed slightly as he struggled to lift his face toward the sound of the dog's whine. His breathing was shallow, his clothes soaked through, and a deep gash ran along his forehead, smeared with dried blood. He blinked, his eyes unfocused, but when they finally met Rachel's, recognition flickered in them. His lips parted, but his voice barely came out. "My kids?" His breath hitched, and he swallowed hard, forcing out a whisper. They're alive?" Rachel's stomach twisted. She turned back to the children, her flashlight trembling in her grasp. The boy held his sister tighter, his knuckles white, his whole body tense. They weren't just lost. They had been out here alone for hours. The girl whimpered again, this time turning her face toward the man. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from crying. The man let out a broken sob. He tried to push himself up, his arms shaking under his own weight, but his legs buckled beneath him. He was too weak. Rachel's mind raced. An accident. It had to be. She knelt beside him. Hey, don't try to move," she urged, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "What happened?" His breathing was ragged. "Car," he managed, "skidded, off the road. I hit my head. I don't remember." He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to recall, then forced them back open. When I woke up, my kids were gone. Rachel's heart pounded. The dog, she must have led them away, kept them safe, kept them warm. She turned back to the boy, her voice softer. It's okay, she said gently. I'm here to help. The boy didn't move, didn't speak. His eyes flicked toward the dog, searching for reassurance. And for the first time that night, the dog nuzzled his palm, as if telling him, it's safe now. Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat as she watched the boy press his hand against the dog's damp fur. It was the first sign of trust she'd seen from him. His sister, still clutching the tattered cloth in her tiny hands, peeked out from behind him, her big, frightened eyes searching Rachel's face. Rachel turned back to their father. His body was trembling from exhaustion, his hands struggling to push himself upright, but his relief was unmistakable. He had thought they were gone. He had thought he had lost them forever. You're safe now, he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm here. Rachel's heart clenched. Not for long, if she didn't act fast. She reached into her pocket, fumbling for her phone. The rain had soaked her clothes and her fingers were numb from the cold. She pressed the emergency dial, praying for a signal. The screen flickered, but the call wouldn't go through. No service. Rachel gritted her teeth. The nearest town was miles away, and she had no idea how far off the road their wrecked car had ended up. There was no time to waste. She turned back to the boy, keeping her voice calm. We need to get your dad somewhere warm, okay? Can you help me? The boy hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Rachel crouched beside their father and carefully looped his arm over her shoulders. He groaned in pain, his body weak and unsteady, but he didn't fight her. The boy reached for his sister's hand, squeezing it tightly before guiding her forward. The dog stayed beside them, her watchful eyes flicking between Rachel and the children. Slowly, painfully, they made their way through the trees. Rachel's legs ached, her soaked clothes weighing her down, but she forced herself forward. She couldn't stop now. Then, headlights. Rachel's breath caught. Through the rain, just beyond the trees, her car's hazard lights blinked like a beacon in the night. We're almost there, she whispered. With the last of his strength, the man stumbled forward, collapsing just as they reached the roadside. Rachel rushed to open the car door, grabbing the emergency blanket from her back seat and wrapping it around the kids. They curled into the warmth, their bodies shaking, their eyes drooping with exhaustion. The dog jumped in beside them, curling protectively against their sides. She wasn't leaving them. Not now, not ever. Rachel turned to the man. He looked at her, his face lined with gratitude. You saved them, he murmured. Rachel glanced at the dog, watching as she laid her head on the little girl's lap, her tired eyes still standing guard. No, Rachel whispered. She did. Some stories leave you speechless, and this is one of them. Imagine driving alone at night, only to be stopped by a dog. Not by accident, but on purpose. What would you do? Would you have followed her into the darkness like Rachel did? Or would you have driven away, never knowing what was waiting in the forest? Now, we want to hear from you. What would you have done in Rachel's situation? Have you ever had a moment where an animal seemed to be trying to tell you something? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, let us know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far our stories travel. Drop your city or country in the comments. We love hearing from all of you. And if you don't want to miss another powerful story like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got another incredible story coming tomorrow, and trust us, you won't want to miss it. So tell us, what's your take on tonight's story? Let's talk in the comments.